This actually happened to me. It's a story I rarely tell, but the memory still burns bright, like a scar that never quite fades. The silk felt like ice against my skin, even through the garment bag. I stared at the crumpled heap on the floor of the guest bedroom closet, the delicate lace shredded, the pearlescent buttons ripped free, and a dark, acrid stain blooming across the bodice of what was supposed to be my wedding dress. My fiancé, Michael, stood beside me, his face a mask of disbelief, while his mother, Eleanor, watched us from the doorway, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. It was the morning of my wedding, less than 3 hours before I was due to walk down the aisle, and Eleanor had just ensured I had no dress to wear. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. The saga of Eleanor began subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a slow-growing vine that eventually chokes out everything around it. When Michael and I first started dating, she was the picture of a doting mother, warm and welcoming, always quick with a compliment or a home-cooked meal. I saw her as a potential ally, a second mother, a woman who had raised the man I loved. Oh, how naive I was. The first tremor of her true nature struck during a family dinner at their sprawling home in Greenwich, Connecticut. We were discussing wedding plans, still months away, and I innocently mentioned my vision for a simple, intimate ceremony. Eleanor, mid-sip of her Cabernet, set her glass down with a clink that seemed to echo through the silence. Simple? She repeated, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that sent a shiver down my spine. Darling, Michael is a Harrington. Our weddings are anything but simple. They are events. From that moment on, every decision, every suggestion I made, was met with a polite but firm dismissal, always couched in the language of what was expected for a Harrington, or what Michael would truly prefer. Michael, bless his heart, was often oblivious, caught between his desire to make me happy and his ingrained habit of deferring to his mother. He loved me, I knew that, but he was also a man who had never truly had to stand up to Eleanor. She was a force of nature, a woman who wielded her wealth and social standing like a finely honed weapon. She controlled every facet of their lives, from the vintage of wine served at dinner to the political affiliations of their acquaintances. Her influence was pervasive, her judgment absolute. I tried to reason with her, to compromise, to find common ground. I suggested a smaller guest list. She countered with an invitation to half of New England's elite. I expressed a preference for a more modern floral arrangement. She insisted on classic white roses, flown in from Holland. Every battle was a miniature war, and I, a newcomer to this gilded cage, was constantly outmaneuvered. The wedding dress, however, was supposed to be mine. I had found it in a small, independent bridal boutique in Beacon Hill, Boston, a vintage-inspired ivory silk gown with delicate French lace and a modest train. It wasn't flashy or ostentatious, but it felt like me. It was perfect. I remember showing Eleanor a photo, my heart aflutter with nervous excitement. She had merely pursed her lips, her eyes scanning the image with an air of clinical assessment. Charming, she'd said, the word devoid of any actual charm, but perhaps a little understated for a Harrington bride. I swallowed my disappointment, clinging to the belief that once she saw it in person, she would understand. I had the dress shipped to Michael's childhood home, where we were staying for the wedding weekend, believing it would be safe in the guest bedroom closet. Michael had assured me Eleanor wouldn't dare interfere with something so personal. He was wrong. As the days leading up to the wedding dwindled, Eleanor's passive aggression escalated. She'd make pointed comments about my family's more modest background, accidentally forget details I'd shared about the ceremony, and subtly undermine my confidence at every turn. Are you sure you want to wear your hair like that, dear? It's a bit severe, don't you think? Or, Michael always loved the way his ex-girlfriend styled her hair for formal events. Each barb was delivered with a saccharine smile, making it impossible to truly confront her without appearing ungrateful or overly sensitive. The tension in the house was a palpable thing, thick and suffocating. Michael, caught in the middle, tried to mediate, but his attempts often felt weak, easily batted away by his mother's practiced dismissals. He'd apologize to me later, promising things would be different once we were married, once we had our own home, far from Eleanor's orbit. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. On the morning of the wedding, a whirlwind of nervous energy and excitement, I went to retrieve my dress. That's when I found it. My beautiful, carefully chosen gown, reduced to a tragic, ruined mess. The air left my lungs in a sharp gasp. I called Michael, my voice trembling, and he rushed in, his jaw dropping when he saw the scene. We both knew with a sickening certainty who was responsible. Eleanor, ever the picture of refined composure, appeared in the doorway, a steaming cup of Earl Grey in her hand. Her gaze drifted from the ruined dress to my tear-filled eyes, then back to the dress, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. "Oh dear," she said, her voice dripping with feigned concern. "What a tragedy. It seems the cleaning staff must have made a dreadful mistake. I told them to be extra careful with your things." The cleaning staff. As if a professional cleaning crew would deliberately shred a wedding dress and then leave it in a crumpled heap. It was a thinly veiled lie, a calculated act of malice, and she didn't even bother to make it believable. Michael, for the first time, seemed to truly grasp the depth of his mother's cruelty. His face hardened, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "Mother," he began, his voice low and dangerous, "what have you done?" Eleanor merely shrugged, taking a delicate sip of her tea. "Honestly, Michael, such dramatics. It's just a dress. We can always find another one. Just a dress. To her, perhaps? To me, it was a symbol of everything I had hoped for, everything I had envisioned for my special day, now desecrated by her petty vindictiveness." In that moment, something shifted within me. The vulnerability, the desire to please, the fear of upsetting her. It all evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She had gone too far. This wasn't just about a dress. It was about control, about power, about making me feel small and insignificant. And I refused to let her win. Michael, seeing the tears streaming down my face, wrapped an arm around me. "Don't worry," he whispered, his voice firm. "We'll fix this. We'll get you a dress." But I knew even then that it wouldn't be fixed with just another dress. This was war, and I was finally ready to fight back. The frantic energy that consumed the house in the immediate aftermath of the dress incident was a chaotic dance of whispered phone calls, urgent searches on bridal boutique websites, and Michael's increasingly strained pleas with his mother to just explain. Eleanor, of course, offered no explanation beyond her flimsy alibi of the negligent cleaning staff. She simply retreated into her usual aristocratic aloofness, feigning sympathy while subtly enjoying the havoc she had wreaked. Her posture, her slight smile, the almost imperceptible flicker in her eyes. I saw it all. She wasn't just smug. She was reveling in my distress. Michael, bless his heart, was in full damage control mode. He was calling every bridal shop in the greater New York area, desperate to find anything I could wear. But it was impossible. The wedding was in mere hours, and I was a standard size, not a sample size. Nothing would fit. Nothing could be altered in time. And certainly nothing could be picked up on such short notice. "It's fine, Michael," I said, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "I'll just wear something else." The thought of walking down the aisle in a simple cocktail dress, or worse, my rehearsal dinner outfit, filled me with a deep, crushing embarrassment. Eleanor had won. She had successfully stripped me of the one thing that made me feel like a bride, reducing me to a spectacle of pity on my own wedding day. But then, a flicker of an idea, born of desperation and a sudden surge of adrenaline, sparked in my mind. It was audacious, expensive, and utterly impractical, but it was the only way to turn Eleanor's victory into her ultimate defeat. "Michael," I said, a new resolve hardening my voice, "I know what to do." His eyes, weary from the morning's crisis, looked at me with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "What is it, love?" "We're going to Bergdorf Goodman." Michael blinked. "Bergdorf now? For what?" "For a wedding dress," I stated, pulling out my phone. "A designer one. The kind Eleanor can't touch, can't ruin, and definitely can't dismiss as understated." The idea was so preposterous that it was brilliant. Bergdorf Goodman, on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, was a sanctuary of luxury, a place where impossible wishes sometimes came true for a price. And I had a secret weapon, my Aunt Carol. Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister, was a whirlwind of energy, a retired fashion editor who still had an impressive network of contacts in the industry. She lived in a chic Upper East Side apartment and possessed a fierce loyalty to her family, especially when one of them was being wronged. I called her, explaining the situation in rushed, breathless sentences. There was a pause on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. Eleanor. Harrington did what? Her voice, usually so composed, crackled with outrage. That venomous old viper? Don't you worry, sweetheart. I know just the person. Within minutes, Aunt Carol had made a series of rapid-fire calls. She contacted her former assistant, now a personal shopper for high-net-worth clients at Bergdorf's, a woman named Sylvie, who was known for her ability to pull off fashion miracles. Sylvie, a true professional, was already making arrangements. Be at Bergdorf's in 45 minutes, Aunt Carol instructed, her voice crisp and commanding. Sylvie will meet you at the bridal salon. She's pulling a few options. And darling, make sure Michael is paying for this. Every single penny. A perverse sense of exhilaration filled me. This was it. This was my stand. Michael, still slightly stunned, was now fully on board, a spark of defiance in his eyes. Let's go, he said, grabbing his keys. And don't worry about my mother. I'll deal with her. We left Eleanor stewing in her carefully constructed web of lies, her self-satisfied smirk slowly dissolving as she realized we weren't just going to roll over and accept her cruelty. The drive into Manhattan was a blur. My mind raced, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Could this really work? Would I actually find a dress? And more importantly, would I be able to walk down the aisle feeling like a bride, not a victim? As we pulled up to Bergdorf's, the grand facade seemed to shimmer with possibility. Sylvie, a vision of elegance in a tailored pantsuit, greeted us at the door of the bridal salon. She was a woman who radiated calm efficiency. Darling, she said, her voice soothing, Aunt Carol explained everything. We're going to make you look absolutely stunning. She led me to a private fitting room where, to my astonishment, 3 exquisite gowns hung, each more breathtaking than the last. They were creations from top designers, Vera Wang, Oscar de la Renta, Monique Lhuillier, pieces that normally required months of ordering and alterations. These are samples, Sylvie explained, but they're in excellent condition. And one of them, I believe, will fit you perfectly. The first gown was a beautiful A-line, but felt too stiff. The second was a slinky mermaid style that, while gorgeous, wasn't quite me. Then came the third. It was a Monique Lhuillier creation, a whisper-thin chantilly lace gown with an illusion neckline, delicate cap sleeves, and a soft, flowing train. It was elegant, romantic, and utterly timeless. As I slipped it on, it felt as if it had been made for me. The lace clung to my curves in all the right places, the fabric shimmering subtly with every movement. It was everything my original dress had been, and so much more. It was a statement. I stepped out of the fitting room and Michael gasped. His eyes, which had been clouded with worry all morning, now shone with pure adoration. You look incredible, he whispered, a tear tracing a path down his cheek. Sylvie, ever the professional, had already arranged for a tailor to be on standby. Within minutes, he was making minor adjustments to the hem and bustle. Simultaneously, a makeup artist and a hairstylist, also arranged by Sylvie, began to transform me. They worked with incredible speed and precision, turning my tear-streaked face into that of a radiant bride. As I sat there, being pampered and prepped, a sense of quiet triumph settled over me. Eleanor had tried to break me, to steal my joy, but she had only succeeded in fueling my resolve. She had tried to humiliate me, but I was about to walk down the aisle in a dress more magnificent than anything she could have possibly imagined. The original dress, the one I had loved, was gone. But this new dress, this unexpected, glorious gown, carried a different kind of power. It was a symbol of resilience, of refusing to be defeated, and of the unwavering support of the people who truly loved me. My initial shock and hurt had slowly given way to a quiet determination. I wasn't just getting a new dress. I was reclaiming my wedding day, my dignity, and my future. And Eleanor Harrington, in her arrogant assumption of victory, had inadvertently handed me the perfect weapon. The stage was set. The transformation was astonishing. Within an hour and a half, I was no longer the distraught bride with a ruined dress, but a vision of unexpected elegance. The Monique Lhuillier gown, perfectly fitted, cascaded around me like a dream. My hair, styled in soft waves and adorned with a delicate crystal comb Sylvie had found, framed a face expertly made up to conceal any lingering stress. I looked in the mirror, and for the first time that morning, I saw a bride, not a victim. Ready? Sylvie asked, holding a small, perfectly matched bouquet of white peonies and eucalyptus that had appeared as if by magic. I nodded, a fierce determination replacing my earlier despair. Michael, looking impossibly handsome in his tuxedo, was waiting. He took my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "Let's do this," he said, his eyes conveying a silent promise of unwavering support. The drive back to Eleanor's estate, where the ceremony was being held, felt different. The tension was still there, a thick, palpable presence, but now it was laced with an electrifying anticipation. We pulled up to the grand entrance, the sprawling grounds already filled with arriving guests, the string quartet playing softly in the background. My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear. It was a blend of nervousness and exhilarating defiance. As I stepped out of the car, I could feel eyes on me. Whispers rippled through the gathering crowd, a mixture of surprise and admiration. My Aunt Carol, standing near the entrance, gave me a proud, almost mischievous wink. I knew Eleanor would be inside, likely orchestrating her grand entrance, completely unaware of the spectacle I was about to make. My father, his face beaming with pride and a hint of bewildered joy, met me at the entrance to the aisle. He had been briefed on the dress crisis, but the sight of me in the magnificent gown clearly exceeded his expectations. "My beautiful girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You look absolutely breathtaking." We began our slow walk down the aisle, the soft strains of Pachelbel's canon filling the air. Every step felt deliberate, powerful. I held my head high, a serene smile fixed on my lips. The guests turned, their murmurs growing louder, then fading into awestruck silence. My gaze swept across the faces, searching. And then I saw her, Eleanor. She was seated in the front row, regal and composed, her eyes sweeping over the crowd with her usual proprietary air. Her gaze landed on me, and for a split second her composure faltered. Her eyes widened, a flicker of shock, then disbelief, then pure, unadulterated fury washing over her face. The smirk she had worn that morning was gone, replaced by a tight, rigid mask. The corner of her mouth twitched, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrest of her chair. It was glorious. She had expected to see me humiliated, distraught, perhaps even absent from my own wedding. Instead, she saw me radiant, elegant, and undoubtedly wearing a gown far more exquisite and expensive than anything she could have anticipated. This wasn't just a dress. It was a defiant declaration. This was my quiet public rebuke. As I reached the altar and took Michael's hand, his smile was wide and genuine, a silent acknowledgement of our shared victory. The ceremony proceeded, a beautiful blur of vows and rings and promises. But throughout it all, I could feel Eleanor's eyes on me, burning with a silent, impotent rage. It was a cold comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, lavishly decorated as only Eleanor could arrange. She moved through the crowd, a forced smile plastered on her face, accepting congratulations for a wedding she had tried to sabotage. But the undercurrent of gossip was undeniable. Guests, many of whom were well aware of Eleanor's domineering nature, whispered about my unexpected gown, the sudden change, the sheer audacity of it all. "Where did she get that dress? It's a L'Huillier, isn't it?" On such short notice, Eleanor must be absolutely seething. I heard snippets, caught glances. The story was spreading, the truth, or at least a highly accurate version of it, circulating through the elite circles. Eleanor's carefully curated image of a benevolent matriarch was being subtly, but effectively, undermined. Later, during the reception, Eleanor approached our table, a glass of champagne in hand. Her smile was brittle, her eyes still holding that dangerous spark. "Darling," she purred, "the dress is certainly a choice. Rather extravagant, wouldn't you say? Especially given the circumstances." She was digging, trying to confirm her suspicions, trying to find a way to discredit me. I met her gaze, a calm smile on my face. "Thank you, Eleanor. It was a gift." I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The ambiguity hung in the air, allowing everyone to draw their own conclusions about who might have gifted me such an expensive gown on such short notice. Michael, ever the diplomat, interjected smoothly. "Mother, isn't the band fantastic? You really outdid yourself with the arrangements." He steered the conversation away, but the message had been delivered. Eleanor's attempt at a subtle jab had been deflected, her attack rendered powerless. The rest of the evening was a blur of dancing, laughter, and heartfelt wishes. But through it all, the memory of that ruined dress, and the exquisite one I now wore, served as a constant reminder. This wasn't just a wedding. It was the first skirmish in a much larger war, and I had won the first battle. As Michael and I drove away, showered with rice and good wishes, I leaned my head on his shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." He kissed my forehead. "Always." Now let's go start our lives, far away from all this. But I knew deep down that far away might not be far enough. Eleanor Harrington was not one to forget a slight, and she was certainly not one to let an insult go unpunished. This was just the beginning. The revenge, the true, satisfying revenge, had yet to be fully realized. The honeymoon was a blissful escape, a much-needed reprieve from the suffocating drama of Eleanor and the Harrington estate. We spent 2 weeks exploring the Amalfi Coast, indulging in sun-drenched days and romantic evenings, trying to forget the chaotic start to our marriage. Michael was attentive, loving, and for the first time, seemed truly relaxed, unburdened by his mother's omnipresent influence. During our quiet moments, we talked about our future, our dreams, and yes, even Eleanor. He apologized again and again for her behavior, for not shielding me more effectively. "I know I should have stood up to her sooner," he confessed one evening, as we watched the sunset over Positano. I've never really had to. She's always been like this, and everyone just accepts it." I listened, understanding the deep-rooted dynamics of his family. Eleanor's power wasn't just financial. It was psychological, built on years of subtle manipulation and an unshakable belief in her own superiority. But something had fundamentally shifted in Michael. Seeing my original dress desecrated, witnessing his mother's cold indifference, had finally broken through years of passive acceptance. He was angry, truly angry, and that anger was directed at his mother, not at me. "She crossed a line, Michael," I said softly. "It wasn't just about a dress. It was about trying to break me, to control me, to show me I didn't belong." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I know, and I won't let her do it again. We're a team, remember?" That conversation under the golden Italian sun solidified our alliance. It wasn't just me against Eleanor anymore, it was us. When we returned to the States, we immediately began looking for our own place, far from Greenwich. We found a charming brownstone in Brooklyn, a world away from the manicured lawns and old money of the Harringtons. It was a conscious choice, a statement of independence. Eleanor naturally was appalled. "Brooklyn?" she'd shrieked over the phone. "Michael, what are you thinking?" "That's no place for a Harrington. And darling, that little brownstone will be far too small for all your things." Her disapproval was a constant drone, but now, armed with Michael's unwavering support, it merely bounced off me. Her attempts to control our lives, to dictate our choices, only strengthened my resolve to forge our own path. The honeymoon period, however, quickly gave way to the cold reality of Eleanor's lingering resentment. She never directly acknowledged the Bergdorf incident again, but her passive-aggressive tactics intensified. She would send us unsolicited, garishly expensive gifts for our new home, a monstrous, antique sideboard that wouldn't fit through our front door, a set of porcelain figurines that looked like they belonged in a museum, not a modern brownstone, always accompanied by a note implying our taste was lacking. She would forget to invite us to family gatherings, only to express feigned surprise when we didn't show up. She'd call Michael repeatedly, complaining about trivial matters, then subtly weave in criticisms of me, my career, or our lifestyle choices. "Your wife seems rather busy, Michael. Is she neglecting you? Or it's a shame she's not more interested in charity work, like all the other Harrington wives." These were the constant low-level skirmishes, designed to chip away at my confidence and sow discord between Michael and me. But I had grown stronger. I learned to anticipate her moves, to deflect her barbs with polite indifference or a strategic change of subject. Michael, too, had developed a thicker skin. He began to set boundaries politely but firmly. He'd cut short her calls, refuse her gifts, and defend me without hesitation. Our united front was a new, unwelcome development for Eleanor. She thrived on control and division, and our solidarity was a direct challenge to her carefully constructed world. It was during one of her particularly egregious phone calls, where she was inquiring about our finances, thinly veiled attempts to suggest I was a gold digger, that a crucial piece of information slipped out. She was lamenting Michael's decision to pursue a career in sustainable architecture, a field she deemed beneath him, and contrasted it with the sensible career choices of his cousins. "Take your cousin David," she'd scoffed. "He's making a fortune in that investment firm, thanks to his father's connections, of course." Not like your father, who let his trust be managed by that dreadful little man, Mr. Abernathy. Lost half of it, he did, before your grandfather intervened. Thank goodness for family money, or you'd both be living in a tent. Michael bristled at the mention of his late father's financial missteps, a sore spot for him. But I latched onto a different detail: Mr. Abernathy. The name felt significant, though I couldn't immediately place why. A few days later, while helping Michael sort through some old boxes from his childhood home that had finally made their way to Brooklyn, I stumbled upon a dusty photo album. Tucked inside was an old, faded newspaper clipping. It was a small article, buried deep in the financial section, about a minor embezzlement scandal that had rocked a local investment firm years ago. The firm was Harrington Capital, a smaller, now-defunct arm of the family's financial empire. The man implicated, though ultimately never charged, was a junior associate named Arthur Abernathy. My blood ran cold. Eleanor's casual remark, coupled with this old clipping, sparked a chilling suspicion. Could there be more to this dreadful little man and the lost half of Michael's father's trust? I remembered Eleanor's consistent attempts to control our finances, her subtle digs about my supposed interest in Michael's money. What if the money wasn't lost at all? What if it had merely been diverted? The idea was audacious, almost unbelievable. Eleanor, the paragon of virtue and propriety, a thief? But the pieces, however fragmented, began to coalesce into a disturbing picture. Her obsession with money, her need for control, her casual cruelty, it all pointed to a deeper, darker secret. I didn't say anything to Michael yet. I needed more. I needed proof. My resolve solidified. This wasn't just about reclaiming my wedding day anymore. This was about justice. This was about protecting Michael, and our future, from the manipulative clutches of his own mother. The game was officially on. The revelation about Arthur Abernathy and the faint echo of a financial scandal gnawed at me. It was a thread, delicate but persistent, and I knew I had to pull on it. My mind, usually focused on my work as a graphic designer, now whirred with possibilities, connecting dots that had previously seemed unrelated. Eleanor's constant need to remind Michael of his inheritance, her subtle hints that it was her family's money that truly sustained them, her controlling grip on every financial decision, it all took on a sinister new meaning. Could she have been siphoning off funds, or at least manipulating them for years? The notion was terrifying yet compelling. I began my own quiet investigation. It started with innocent-sounding questions to Michael, framed as curiosity about his family history. So, your father was involved in investment banking, too. That's interesting. What exactly happened with Harrington Capital? Michael, ever open with me, explained that Harrington Capital had been his grandfather's pet project, a venture that went south after his father, Robert, took over. Robert, a kind but somewhat naive man, had apparently trusted the wrong people, losing a significant portion of his inheritance before his own father stepped in to salvage what was left. The official story was that Arthur Abernathy, a junior manager, had been involved in some risky, unauthorized trades that led to heavy losses. He was fired, but due to a lack of concrete evidence and a desire to avoid public scandal, the family never pressed charges. Grandfather always said it was a bitter lesson, Michael recounted, about who to trust in business. Mother never forgave Dad for it. I listened, a growing sense of unease settling in. The pieces fit too neatly into Eleanor's narrative of his father's incompetence and her family's superior financial acumen. But what if it was a carefully constructed fiction? What if Abernathy was a scapegoat? My next step was more clandestine. I spent hours online, sifting through old newspaper archives, looking for anything related to Harrington Capital, Robert Harrington, or Arthur Abernathy. The internet, a vast ocean of information, slowly yielded more fragments. I found a few more mentions of the minor scandal at Harrington Capital, confirming Abernathy's involvement but offering no new details. The articles were sparse, almost as if the incident had been deliberately downplayed. The family's influence was clearly at play. This, ironically, only strengthened my suspicion. The wealthy often managed to bury their dirtiest laundry. Then I turned to more unconventional sources. I remembered Michael mentioning that his father had been an avid collector of antique maps. His study back at the Greenwich estate was filled with them. What if, I thought, Robert Harrington, a man known for his meticulousness, had kept something, some record, that contradicted the official story? The idea seemed far-fetched, but I had to try. I needed to get into that study. This required a certain level of stealth. Eleanor rarely left the estate unattended, but she had a standing bridge game every Thursday. Afternoon at the Greenwich Country Club. It was a 4-hour window, just enough time. I floated the idea to Michael, framing it as a romantic notion to retrieve some of his father's personal effects for our Brooklyn home. He, still feeling guilty about my ruined dress, readily agreed. "I'll distract Mother at the club," he said. "Make sure she's deeply engrossed in her bridge game. You'll have plenty of time." The plan was risky, bordering on espionage. On the chosen Thursday, Michael dropped me off at the estate, ostensibly to pick up some of his old books. As soon as his car was out of sight, I made a beeline for Robert Harrington's study. The room was exactly as Michael remembered it. Dark wood, leather-bound books, and maps, dozens of them, unfurled and framed on the walls, rolled in tubes in dusty corners. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and pipe tobacco. I started systematically, carefully, going through every drawer, every shelf, every hidden compartment. I was looking for anything, a diary, a ledger, correspondence, anything with Abernathy's name. Hours passed. My hands grew grimy, my patience frayed. Just as I was about to give up, disheartened, something caught my eye. Behind a large antique atlas on a lower shelf, there was a small velvet-covered box. It wasn't locked. Inside, nestled among old photographs, was a small leather-bound journal. It was Robert Harrington's personal diary. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. I opened it, my fingers trembling slightly. The entries were dated from the period of the Harrington Capital scandal. Robert's elegant script filled the pages, detailing his daily activities, his anxieties, his observations. I scanned quickly, looking for keywords for Abernathy's name. And then I found it. An entry from October 12th, approximately 2 years before his death. Eleanor insists I sign over the remainder of the Harrington Capital assets to her management, citing Abernathy's incompetence. Says she has a trusted advisor who can salvage the situation. I'm uneasy. Abernathy has been an honest man, perhaps too honest for this family. He speaks of accounting discrepancies and unusual transactions that don't add up to simple losses. He suspects something darker. But Eleanor's will is formidable. She's threatening to expose my prior business missteps if I don't comply. I flipped more pages, my eyes devouring the words. Another entry weeks later, Abernathy fired. Eleanor orchestrated it. I tried to defend him, but she had already planted doubts among the family. My father, in his old age, believes her. The remaining assets are now under her direct control, managed by her advisor, a man I've never met, but whose name Eleanor mentioned as Mr. Thorne, her childhood friend. Abernathy warned me. They're not just incompetent. Mr. Harrington, they're stealing from you. I fear he was right. My hands are tied. The entries continued, filled with Robert's growing despair, his realization that Eleanor was systematically taking control of his inheritance, all under the guise of protecting it. He mentioned coded accounts, offshore transfers, and a complex web of shell companies. He couldn't prove it, he wrote, because Eleanor had expertly covered her tracks, using his own perceived incompetence as a shield. He had tried to gather evidence himself, but was too ill, too emotionally drained to fight his formidable wife. He died a year later, the truth unspoken, his legacy tarnished by Eleanor's lies. I closed the journal, my mind reeling. Eleanor hadn't just thrown away my dress. She had spent years systematically defrauding her own husband, meticulously destroying his reputation, and then scapegoating an innocent man, all to consolidate her power and wealth. The scale of her deception was staggering. This wasn't just about petty revenge anymore. This was about exposing a criminal, about delivering justice for Michael's father, and about protecting our future from a truly ruthless individual. The battle for the dress had been a skirmish. This was the true war, and I had just found the first, crucial piece of evidence. The leather-bound journal felt heavy in my hands, not just with age, but with the weight of Robert Harrington's unspoken agony and Eleanor's calculated betrayal. I tucked it carefully into my bag, my mind a whirlwind of shock and righteous indignation. The drive back to Brooklyn was a blur, my thoughts consumed by the magnitude of Eleanor's deceit. She wasn't just a domineering mother-in-law. She was a criminal, a manipulator who had systematically plundered her husband's inheritance and framed an innocent man. The smug satisfaction I had felt on my wedding day, walking down the aisle in that designer gown, now seemed almost trivial in comparison to the scale of this new discovery. Michael was waiting for me at our brownstone, oblivious to the bombshell I carried. He was making dinner, the scent of garlic and tomatoes filling the air. He turned, a smile on his face, but it faltered when he saw my expression. "What is it?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I took a deep breath, the words catching in my throat. "Michael," I began, "I found something in your father's study. Something important." I handed him the journal. He looked at it, then at me, a question in his eyes. "It's Dad's diary," he said, his voice soft with reverence. "I haven't seen this in years." "Read it," I urged, "especially the entries from 2 years before he died, about Harrington Capital and Mr. Abernathy." Michael sat down, carefully turning the brittle pages. As he read, his expression shifted from curiosity to bewilderment, then to dawning horror. His face, usually so open, contorted with a mixture of grief and pure, unadulterated rage. He read in silence for a long time, the only sound the rustle of paper and the ticking of the antique clock in the living room. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed, but a fierce, unfamiliar fire burned within them. She did this?" he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "She framed Abernathy? She stole from my father?" I nodded, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "It looks that way, Michael. It explains everything. Her control, her constant need to remind you of family money, her disdain for your father's business acumen. It was all a cover." Michael ran a hand through his hair, his body trembling with the force of his emotions. "My God," he murmured. "All these years, I believed her. I believed Dad was just careless, naive. And all this time, she was the one." The pain in his voice was raw, heartbreaking. It wasn't just the betrayal of his mother. It was the rewriting of his father's legacy, the shattering of his understanding of his family history. "We have to do something," he said, looking at me, his eyes filled with a desperate resolve. "We can't let her get away with this." "We won't," I promised, my own resolve hardening. "But we need more than just this journal. We need concrete proof, financial records. We need to find Arthur Abernathy." Eleanor, in her arrogance, truly believed she was untouchable. Her wealth, her social standing, her carefully crafted image, they were her armor. She had successfully silenced her husband, scapegoated Abernathy, and maintained her lie for years. She had no idea that a discarded wedding dress and a quiet, determined daughter-in-law would be her undoing. The next few weeks became a clandestine operation. Michael, fueled by a renewed sense of purpose and a burning need for justice for his father, threw himself into the investigation. He started by discreetly probing old family connections, asking about Abernathy, about Harrington Capital, careful not to arouse suspicion. His mother, sensing a subtle shift in his demeanor, began to watch him more closely, her questions more pointed, her phone calls more frequent. But Michael, now fully aware of her manipulative tactics, met her with an unnerving calm that only seemed to irritate her further. He was learning to play her game. Our primary goal was to locate Arthur Abernathy. If Robert Harrington's journal was to be believed, Abernathy held crucial pieces of the puzzle. It wasn't easy. He had seemingly vanished after the scandal, his reputation ruined. I used my research skills, delving into public records, social media, though Abernathy was of an older generation, less likely to be online, and even old professional directories. Finally, after countless dead ends, I found a lead. A distant relative of Abernathy's had posted a memorial message on an obscure genealogical forum, mentioning his passing a few years prior but also referencing his only living child, a daughter named Sarah, who was a librarian in a small town in upstate New York. It was a long shot, but it was our only shot. We drove to the quiet, picturesque town, a world away from the opulent halls of Greenwich. The library was a charming, old building, filled with the comforting scent of books. We found Sarah Abernathy, a woman in her late 40s, with kind eyes and a reserved demeanor. When we introduced ourselves and mentioned her father's name, a flicker of guardedness appeared in her eyes. "My father is no longer with us," she said, her voice soft but firm. "And we don't discuss his past." "We understand," Michael said gently. "But we believe your father was wrongly accused. My father, Robert Harrington, was his colleague. He kept a journal." I handed her a copy of the relevant pages from Robert's diary. As she read, her face crumpled. Tears welled in her eyes, silent and profound. "He tried to tell me," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "He tried to tell me he was innocent, that he'd been framed. But I was so young, and the scandal, it destroyed him. He never recovered his good name." She confirmed everything. Her father had indeed discovered discrepancies, offshore. Accounts, and a complex shell game designed to siphon off funds from Robert Harrington's inheritance. He had meticulously documented everything, hoping to expose the truth, but Eleanor's influence had been too strong. "My father kept copies," Sarah said, her voice stronger now, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "He said if anyone ever came looking, if anyone ever truly wanted the truth, they would find it. He wanted his name cleared." She led us to a back room, a dusty archive filled with boxes. There, in a carefully labeled box, were folders filled with documents, bank statements, investment reports, correspondences, and a detailed, handwritten ledger outlining every fraudulent transaction, every shell company, every penny diverted. Arthur Abernathy's meticulous work. It was all there, laid bare. The undeniable proof of Eleanor Harrington's grand deception. We had done it. We had unearthed the truth, not just for us, but for Robert Harrington and for Arthur Abernathy. The tables were about to turn, and Eleanor, the untouchable matriarch, was about to face a reckoning far more devastating than a ruined wedding dress. The evidence in our possession, Robert Harrington's diary, Arthur Abernathy's meticulously kept ledgers, bank statements, and correspondence outlining years of fraudulent transfers, was a ticking time bomb. It wasn't just enough to expose Eleanor, it was enough to incriminate her. Michael, now armed with an undeniable truth, was a changed man. The passive deference he once held for his mother had been replaced by a fierce protective resolve, ignited by the betrayal of his father and the decades of lies. "We can't just confront her," Michael stated, his voice calm but firm, as we spread the documents across our kitchen table in Brooklyn. "She'll deny everything, twist it, throw lawyers at us. We need a strategy." He was right. Eleanor wasn't just a powerful woman. She was a cunning adversary. Her network of influence extended deep into the legal and financial circles of Connecticut. A direct confrontation would only allow her to preemptively move assets or construct an impenetrable defense. Our revenge had to be surgical, public, and undeniable. Our first step was to consult an attorney. Michael's cousin David, the very sensible investment banker Eleanor had once praised, was a corporate lawyer at a prestigious firm in Manhattan. Despite his mother's opinion, David had always been a good guy, a distant but friendly face at family gatherings. We decided to approach him carefully under the guise of estate planning questions. David listened intently as Michael, with my interjections, carefully laid out the story, omitting the more dramatic details of the wedding dress, but focusing on the financial irregularities. When Michael finally pulled out Robert's diary and Abernathy's ledgers, David's calm demeanor dissolved. His eyes widened, his expression shifting from professional interest to genuine shock. This is explosive," he whispered, examining the documents. "If this is what it appears to be, Eleanor could be facing serious charges. Fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice. And the amount of money, it's substantial." He confirmed our suspicions. Abernathy's documentation was damning. It outlined a sophisticated scheme of asset diversion through shell corporations and offshore accounts, meticulously managed by a network of trustees Eleanor controlled, all initiated shortly after Robert Harrington had entrusted his remaining assets to her. David advised against immediate legal action, suggesting we gather more contemporary evidence. "Eleanor is wealthy enough to drag this out for years in court," he warned. "We need irrefutable proof of her current financial machinations, not just historical ones. We need to catch her in the act, or at least with active evidence." This presented a new challenge: how to gather current evidence without alerting Eleanor. It required a mole, someone close to her who could access her private financial records. The obvious candidate was her longtime financial advisor, a Mr. Thorne, the childhood friend Robert Harrington had mentioned in his diary. Thorne was Eleanor's confidant, her right-hand man in financial matters. He was also, by all accounts, a man who profited immensely from his relationship with Eleanor. He would be difficult to turn. "He's loyal to her," Michael mused. "But everyone has a price, or a weakness." I remembered a casual comment Eleanor had made about Thorne during one of her rare, almost civil conversations with me. She had complained about his son's gambling debts, a source of constant frustration for Thorne, who apparently was constantly bailing him out. That was his weakness. Michael, leveraging his family connections, discreetly arranged a meeting with Thorne's son, Ryan, under the pretense of discussing a new architectural project. Ryan, a struggling artist with a serious gambling addiction, was exactly as Eleanor had described him, desperate for money. Michael, with my guidance, carefully broached the topic, not by accusing Thorne, but by expressing concern over some unusual discrepancies in his father's old family trust, hinting that Mr. Thorne might inadvertently be implicated. He spoke of protecting reputations and avoiding messy public scandals. The implication was clear: cooperate or risk exposure alongside Eleanor. Ryan, terrified of his father's reputation being ruined and his own financial lifeline severed, became our reluctant informant. He confirmed that his father, Mr. Thorne, was indeed managing a complex web of accounts for Eleanor, many of which had suspicious activity. He admitted his father often complained about Eleanor's unethical demands, but felt trapped, fearing her retribution if he ever crossed her. Ryan, wanting to protect his father, agreed to discreetly obtain copies of recent statements and communications related to Eleanor's trusts, particularly those connected to the shell corporations Abernathy had identified. The risk was immense. If Eleanor discovered our infiltration, the consequences could be severe. But the thought of justice, of clearing Robert Harrington's and Arthur Abernathy's names, propelled us forward. Weeks turned into a tense, agonizing wait. Ryan, working from within Eleanor's inner circle, managed to provide us with an almost daily stream of encrypted emails, scanned documents, and phone logs. Each piece of information was meticulously analyzed by David and his team. The picture that emerged was even more damning than we had initially imagined. Eleanor wasn't just managing the stolen funds, she was actively using them to finance her extravagant lifestyle, leveraging them to exert control over various businesses, and even investing in ventures that directly benefited her, all while maintaining the pretense of responsible stewardship of the Harrington family wealth. She was a financial puppeteer, pulling strings that manipulated fortunes. David confirmed that with this new evidence, we had an airtight case. "We can hit her with everything," he said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Fraud, embezzlement, potentially even money laundering. This isn't just a civil suit. This is a criminal prosecution. But how to deliver the final blow? A quiet legal battle, while effective, wouldn't have the same impact as a public reckoning. Eleanor thrived on her public image, her carefully constructed facade of impeccable integrity. We needed to shatter that facade, to expose her for the manipulative, ruthless individual she truly was, not just to the courts, but to her entire social world. The thought of her public humiliation, a complete reversal of the role she had cast me in on my wedding day, was a powerful motivator. The target, the Harrington Family Charity Gala. An annual event, meticulously organized by Eleanor, where she was celebrated as the benevolent matriarch, the pillar of the community. It was the perfect stage for her downfall. Michael and I began to plan, not just a legal strategy, but a dramatic, undeniable exposure that would leave Eleanor's reputation in tatters, a final chilling payback for every slight, every lie, and every stolen penny. The annual Harrington Family Charity Gala was Eleanor's pièce de résistance, an extravagant affair held at a prestigious New York City ballroom, designed to showcase her philanthropy and impeccable social standing. It was always a who's who of East Coast society, a place where Eleanor reigned supreme, draped in designer gowns and basking in the adoration of her peers. For us, it was the perfect stage for her undoing. The plan was audacious, intricate, and required flawless execution. We had David, our lawyer, preparing the official legal documents, a civil suit for restitution, and a criminal complaint that would be filed simultaneously. But the public exposure, the true revenge, would come at the gala itself. We needed to deliver the news in a way that left no doubt, no room for Eleanor to spin or deny. Our strategy involved 3 key elements: a public accusation, undeniable proof, and a carefully orchestrated media leak. The public accusation would come from an unexpected source. I had reached out to Sarah Abernathy, Arthur Abernathy's daughter, explaining our full intentions. She was hesitant at first, still scarred by her father's public humiliation, but the prospect of finally clearing his name, of exposing the woman who had destroyed his life, ultimately swayed her. She agreed to attend the gala, a quiet but potent symbol of the past Eleanor had tried to bury. The undeniable proof would be distributed strategically. Michael and I, with David's help, created a concise but devastating dossier containing the most damning excerpts from Robert's diary, Abernathy's ledgers, and the recent financial documents Ryan Thorne had provided. It would be clear, concise, and undeniable proof of Eleanor's decades-long fraud. The media leak was crucial. My Aunt Carol, with her vast network in the media world, was our secret weapon. She contacted a sharp, investigative journalist from a prominent New York newspaper, a woman known for her no-holds-barred reporting on the city's elite. Aunt Carol, framing it as a shocking scandal involving one of New England's most prominent families, piqued the journalist's interest. We provided the journalist with an anonymous tip, hinting at the upcoming revelation and promising a full dossier of evidence if she attended the gala. The stage was set for a public spectacle. The evening of the gala arrived with a palpable hum of excitement. Michael and I walked into the glittering ballroom, our hands clasped, a calm determination settling over us. Eleanor, a vision in emerald green, was holding court near the grand entrance, accepting accolades with her usual practiced grace. Her eyes met mine across the crowded room, and a brief, almost imperceptible frown creased her brow. She still didn't trust me, but she had no idea the sword that hung over her head. The night progressed, a kaleidoscope of polite conversation, clinking champagne glasses, and the rhythmic strains of a live orchestra. Michael and I mingled, exchanging pleasantries, our hearts pounding beneath our elegant attire. We spotted Sarah Abernathy, quietly seated at a table near the back, looking nervous but resolute. The investigative journalist, a keen-eyed woman with a notebook discreetly tucked into her clutch, was already making the rounds, observing. Around 10 o'clock, as Eleanor prepared to make her traditional thank you speech, a moment she always relished, Michael signaled David. David, with a calm professionalism that belied the storm he was about to unleash, approached the master of ceremonies. A few hushed words, a discreet exchange of envelopes, and the MC, looking visibly flustered, announced a special presentation before Eleanor's speech. Eleanor, initially annoyed by the deviation from her carefully planned agenda, stiffened as Michael and I, accompanied by David and Sarah Abernathy, calmly walked onto the stage. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. This was not part of Eleanor's script. Michael, his voice clear and strong, took the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces in the ballroom. "Tonight we are here to celebrate philanthropy. But before my mother delivers her remarks, I feel it's important to shine a light on a different kind of truth." He paused, his eyes locking with Eleanor's, her face, which had been a mask of regal composure, now contorted into a snarl of pure rage. She knew. "For years," Michael continued, "my father, Robert Harrington, was unfairly maligned, accused of financial mismanagement that lost a significant portion of his inheritance. An innocent man, Arthur Abernathy, was publicly disgraced and his career destroyed." He gestured to Sarah. "This is Sarah Abernathy, Arthur's daughter, who is here tonight to bear witness." The room erupted in a chorus of confused murmurs. Eleanor, regaining her composure, started to rise from her seat, a furious protest forming on her lips. But David, stepping forward, held up a thick manila envelope. "Mrs. Harrington," he stated, his voice ringing with authority, "these documents reveal a decades-long pattern of fraudulent activity, embezzlement, and the systematic theft of Robert Harrington's inheritance. They meticulously detail how you, Eleanor Harrington, orchestrated this scheme, using shell corporations and offshore accounts to divert funds for your personal gain, all while blaming an innocent man." As he spoke, a team of young lawyers, discreetly positioned throughout the ballroom, began distributing the dossiers we had prepared. They were handed to key guests, to the media, to anyone who mattered. The rustle of paper, the sudden silence, the collective gasp of realization, it was deafening. The journalist, already briefed, had her camera phone out, snapping photos, her pen flying across her notebook. Eleanor was frozen, trapped in the harsh glare of the stage lights, her emerald gown now seeming to mock her. Her empire, her meticulously constructed facade, was crumbling before her very eyes. Her socialite friends, her business associates, her family members, all stared at the documents, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. There was no escape. The ultimate revenge wasn't just about financial ruin. It was about the utter destruction of her most cherished possession. her reputation. The sudden, stark reality of the documents being passed around the ballroom hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Her face, which had been contorted in a snarl of rage, now drained of all color, leaving her pale and visibly trembling. The elegant posture she always maintained crumbled, and she sank back into her chair, her eyes darting frantically from Michael and me on stage to the damning papers in the hands of her closest friends and most powerful acquaintances. The whispers in the room had ceased, replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. Every eye was on Eleanor, not with admiration, but with a chilling mixture of disbelief and dawning comprehension. Her carefully cultivated image as the benevolent matriarch, the pillar of the community, was shattering into a million pieces. Michael continued, his voice unwavering, laying bare the decades of deceit. "The evidence we possess," he announced, holding up one of Abernathy's ledgers, "shows a calculated, systematic betrayal. Not just of my father, but of the very values this gala purports to uphold." He gestured to David. "Our legal team will be filing a civil suit for full restitution and a criminal complaint for fraud and embezzlement. First thing tomorrow morning." The words hung in the air, heavy with consequence. A few of Eleanor's closest allies, caught in the crossfire of public exposure, began to discreetly gather their things, their faces etched with discomfort. The investigative journalist, whose initial tip had now exploded into a full-blown scandal, was furiously typing on her phone, undoubtedly sending dispatches to her editor. Eleanor, finally finding her voice, let out a choked cry. "This is a lie," she shrieked, struggling to stand. "A baseless fabrication? My own son. Trying to disgrace me." But her words, shrill and desperate, lacked conviction. The evidence, printed on glossy paper and now held in the hands of everyone who mattered, spoke for itself. Sarah Abernathy, standing silently beside me, finally stepped forward, her quiet presence a powerful counterpoint to Eleanor's desperate theatrics. "My father was an honorable man," she said, her voice soft but clear, amplified by the microphone. "He suffered his entire life under a cloud of false accusation. Tonight his name is cleared." The raw emotion in her voice resonated with the stunned audience, lending an undeniable weight to our accusations. The rest of the evening was a blur of chaos and unraveling. As security discreetly escorted a distraught Eleanor from the ballroom, a woman who had arrived as a queen and departed in disgrace, the whispers turned into outright conversations, fueled by shock and outrage. Michael and I stayed for a short while, accepting quiet congratulations from a few brave souls, but mostly observing the rapid collapse of Eleanor's social standing. The headlines the next morning were brutal. Harrington matriarch accused of decades-long fraud, philanthropist exposed as embezzler, son files criminal charges against mother. The story went viral, splashed across every major news outlet, shared and dissected on social media. Eleanor Harrington, once the untouchable doyenne of Connecticut society, became a pariah overnight. The legal proceedings were swift and uncompromising. With the undeniable evidence we possessed, Eleanor had little room to maneuver. Her carefully constructed network of lawyers and financial advisors, many of whom were now implicated in the scandal, abandoned her. Mr. Thorne, terrified of losing his own freedom, cooperated fully with the prosecution, providing even more incriminating details about Eleanor's financial schemes. The civil suit resulted in a massive judgment against her, requiring her to return all the embezzled funds to the Robert Harrington estate, along with substantial punitive damages. The criminal charges, while not resulting in a lengthy prison sentence due to her age and the complexities of the historical fraud, led to a significant period of house arrest, a complete freezing of her remaining personal assets, and a permanent tarnishing of her name. The Greenwich estate, the symbol of her power and control, was eventually sold to cover the restitution and legal fees. Michael and I watched from afar as the grand old house, once a source of so much pain, was stripped of its grandeur, its secrets finally exposed. We used a portion of the recovered funds to establish a foundation in Robert Harrington's name, dedicated to supporting ethical financial practices and helping victims of financial fraud. Sarah Abernathy became an integral part of its board, her father's legacy finally honored and redeemed. Our lives, free from Eleanor's shadow, blossomed. Our brownstone in Brooklyn became a true home, filled with love, laughter, and the quiet satisfaction of justice served. Michael thrived in his sustainable architecture firm, building a life rooted in integrity and purpose. Our relationship, forged in the fires of adversity, was stronger than ever. Occasionally, news would trickle down about Eleanor. Stripped of her wealth, her social standing, and her ability to manipulate, she became a reclusive, bitter old woman, abandoned by the very society she had once so desperately sought to impress. Her life, once a dazzling display of opulence and control, was reduced to a desolate echo of her former self. The revenge wasn't just sweet, it was complete. It was a complete dismantling of everything she held dear, a public and undeniable destruction of her power and her reputation. The memory of my ruined wedding dress, the tears, the humiliation, still surfaced sometimes. But now, it was always followed by the triumphant image of me walking down that aisle, radiant and defiant, and the ultimate, chilling satisfaction of seeing Eleanor's reign come to an ignominious end. Justice, it turned out, wore a designer gown. The end.